What is going on, Empire Builders? I am so stoked because today is episode number 44, and we have Kameron Snow in the building. What's going on, Kameron?
No, not much, Brian. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. So Kameron and I met in Santa Barbara at a mastermind event a couple months ago, and Kameron is an incredible copywriter, so much so that he works with people like Scott Oldford over at Leadcraft and whatever Scott's got cooking on nowadays. And it's awesome because, Scott's, I think, one of the few marketers whose content just really, really resonates with me. And you are the guy behind the scenes making sure all of that happens. I can't wait to have you here today to share a little bit about what we need to know about how to be better copywriters.
Yeah.
Before we dive into all that, man, why don't you just in your own words tell us a little bit about yourself and then kind of how you got here?
Yeah, it's an interesting story. So I actually spent 6 years in politics. My dad worked in politics my entire life, and so I grew up around that world. I just had organic connections. And so when I was in high school, there was this guy in my church who had started his own political consulting agency, and I started interning for him in my senior year, and it just turned into a job, and I ended up spending the next 6 years working in politics. So I did everything from working on campaigns on the ground or doing consulting and working for an elected official. Those are kind of like the three stools of politics. And so I did everything. And I guess I learned copywriting in politics. I just didn't know it was called copywriting until I left politics. So there was one day, almost 2 years ago now, I was sitting on my couch and I'd been following Scott on Facebook for a while, and he posted a job ad for a marketing assistant. And I was like, oh, that sounds cool. Yeah, I could do that. That would be really fun. And I was like, I should apply for that. And the thought of leaving politics had never crossed my mind.
Right.
And so I applied for it. I went through this absolutely ludicrous application process that was 3 steps. Probably took me 12 hours to get through this whole thing.
Damn.
I had to do like an application that took me like an hour. I had to create a video of myself explaining why I wanted the job, a slideshow, and a landing page. And there was another interview after that, which, by the way, I'm the only person who's ever had to do that whole process. Everyone else, like Scott just hired. I think after me, they just realized it was a bit much. So started working with Scott, and originally I was doing scheduling for him. And then he realized I could write and just started giving me stuff to write. And it just kind of went from there. And I dove into the art of copy and learned it from there. And since then, we've built Leadcraft to 1 million plus. And then Scott blew that up in September. And we started the Relevancy Engine, which is a more focused group coaching program for entrepreneurs who are already making mid-6 figures. And that program is all about taking Scott's method of ROI, relevancy, omnipresence, and intimacy, and implementing it in your business to kind of lay the foundation for a 7-figure business. So that's what we do now. That business is now grown to probably close to $500,000. It's been 3 or 4 months, maybe 4 or 5.
Wow.
And it will be $1 million, probably $2 million business by year's end for sure. So that's the journey. That's how I ended up here, and it's what I do.
I love that, man. So tell me, politics isn't one of my favorite things to talk about with other people, but do you feel a little bit like relieved you got out of politics when you did?
Yes.
I can imagine. We won't get into it. I was wondering, like, had it back in my mind. I wonder if he left because of the 2016 election, but
it was like right before that, dude.
Damn.
So I won't make any political statements about any candidates, but like there were certain people that I didn't necessarily feel great about who were on the rise, and I got out right before a number of things happened that people can probably figure out of a certain candidate getting a certain nomination. But after I got out, it was a time of probably 2 or 3 months of just detox, because no matter what you do in politics, you kind of have to align what you believe and what you talk about publicly with whoever you're working for. And so you have to kind of detox from that and then find yourself again. It was an interesting process, but also very healthy. I'm super glad I left.
Yeah, well, what's interesting about politics and religion, people have all these really strong opinions about it. But what I think is so fascinating about both of those as marketers and people in sales, like learning from the best politicians and religious leaders, because there's a lot of marketing and sales in that, and convincing people to see one way versus another. So, and again, that's why I think, and you can share in a second here what you feel about, words and copywriting, but words are crazy powerful. Like, words have changed the course of history, and from big moments in time to small things where, like, I'm just looking at a sales page and wow, that spoke to my pains, that convinced me I'm going to buy. Like, it's so powerful. So how do you feel about words and kind of how they play a role in our society?
Well, you're absolutely right. And there's a correlation between copywriting and politics, and the power of communication. So there was one concept that I picked up in politics that I use here and there in my copywriting, and it's a matrix. You have like your grid here, and we would organize it based on who our candidate was and who the opposition was. And there was this line and you would call it, you don't want to go below the line. And I'll see if I can get this right. Up here you had like what we say about ourselves, what we say about our opponent, what our opponent says about us, what our opponent says about themselves. And the rule was you never wanted to use your opponent's words. Now, because you want to get your message across.
Right.
You can use that to a certain extent in a broader marketing application, because you always want to be using the words that your target market is using. That's really the important thing. And the intersection is that you have a certain message that you want to get across, and there are certain words that your target market uses, and you have to match it in a way that they understand and they resonate with what you're saying, that they can understand and that they really feel that you get them, while at the same time getting your unique sales proposition, your unique value across in a way that kind of like, oh, okay, that's new. They get me, but this is like a new thing, a new solution to my problem. So there's absolutely, power in using the right words, which is really what copywriting is all about, is aligning what you want to say with the words that your market is already using.
Yeah, for sure, man. And we're going to get into a couple of tips here in a minute, but I'm just curious because this was brought up. What's one of your favorite ways to go extract that language from your customers? One of the best pieces of advice that I heard was you can go on to Amazon and look at reviews of books, and then you can go find the positive and negative reviews and see what keywords and things come up most often. But what kind of stuff do you do to really uncover people's words they use?
Yeah, the Amazon review mining, that's a good tactic, but in certain markets it can fall flat. Like if you are doing business to consumer, that's usually a really great way to go for your research. Like I had a client who they sold an app for Shopify stores, and they had like 400 or 500 5-star reviews. And so for me, it was just like super easy to go in, pull out the good stuff and craft a sales page because it was all just laying there. For other like higher involvement products like the Relevancy Engine, or if you're a coach, consultant, expert in that kind of thing, which is kind of my niche, then your best method of research is the phone or the Zoom call. Just getting on the phone and talking to people and asking them these questions, and just having in-depth conversations and letting the conversations go and asking these open-ended questions of how do you feel about this, instead of asking yes and no questions, but really just getting with an actual member of your target market and actually having a real conversation and talking it through. Another more automated way would be crafting a survey. There's the Ask method by Ryan Levesque. That's a good one. It's a little complicated to analyze all that data, but the core principle of just asking this big question of what's your biggest challenge, and going from there and extrapolating the pain points and things that you can use in your copy, that is where the best copy is grown. It's where you go to your target market, you say, what hurts right now? What's the big problem? You extract that information, and then you just put it into your copy, structure it a bit, and that is the most successful method. The legends like Gary Halbert, who is an excellent copywriter, and like Eugene Schwartz, legendary copywriter, those guys said that creativity was a stupid way to write copy. Like there's an element of creativity, but your copy is written by your market, and your job as a copywriter is to identify what the big angle is, the big idea, and then take it and structure it in a way that it can bring in the profits. So like just writing something that you imagine might be good is a really terrible way to write copy. It has to be based in reality.
That's good advice, man, because that's what I used to do too. I would like ask myself what they wanted to hear instead of like the obvious answer was actually hearing it from them. So I love that advice, man. Really solid. But already we've covered some really good stuff. But before we went live, and you and I were talking before, what I really brought you on to do was I wanted you to kind of talk about 3 different tips or pointers you had. One for people who are just starting out, they're new, maybe one a little bit more intermediate, and then one advanced. So if you don't mind, maybe we can get into that. And what would you advise to someone who's, maybe they're not new at marketing. They could be new at marketing, but they're just new to the idea of copywriting. And what would you say to them?
So for people who are beginning, who are starting at the very beginning, maybe they've never written their first word of copy or they haven't realized it. I have a mindset thing for you. And that is that the best way that you can think about your copy is not, how can I sell things? But it's everything that you write should be a benefit to your reader. So there's this whole thing about features versus benefits. Let's, say you've got, I don't know, if you're selling a car and it can go up to 160 miles an hour. Saying this car can drive 160 miles an hour, that's a feature, but the benefit would be go really fast so that your friends can see how cool you are. That's like a really rudimentary example, but you can take your product, what you're trying to sell, and step around so that you're reading it from their perspective and ask the question, what's in it for me? So as you write your copy, you can go back and just each line, you're just like, so what? What's in it for me? Like, why should I care? Because everything should be a benefit for your reader.
Yeah. One of my favorite examples of this that comes to mind right away was the original iPod. It wasn't the first MP3 player out there. But everyone else was promoting, we have 2 gigabytes of space and, it's this, comes in blue and red. And Apple was like 1,000 songs in your pocket. And they changed the whole industry because it was just, this is what this does for you. And I think that's a really simple example that I like.
Yeah, exactly. So that's like super actionable. That's a shift that you have to make before you write your copy. So for people who are kind of more intermediate, I have a character trait for you that you should be developing. This comes from Vic Schwab, who wrote the book, How to Write a Good Advertisement. This was the copywriter who made the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, a bestseller back in like the 30s and 40s. Which also, both those books are great books to read. But he said that there are 2 things that a copywriter needs to be successful, 2 character traits that you should have. And it's humility and doubt. Humility, because you need to be able to read your copy and write your copy in a way that you have to understand that it may not be this big hit. Open to the fact that there are multiple ways that you can sell this product, and having the humility not to get attached to something and to have the grace so that if someone else comes in and just tears it to pieces, you can accept that. Or if the market just doesn't respond and it's a flop, like you have the humility to accept that. And doubt, because almost for the same reason, like you need to be able to write something, position something as a benefit, and then be able to question it. Because it's that questioning and that doubt of your own craft in a healthy and productive way, not a self-defeating way where you're just like, I can't do anything. But doubting it in a way that pushes it to be better. Like, is this true? How can I make this better? And that's what pushes your copy to the next level of consistently questioning your claims. And again, it kind of ties into the first point of looking at it from your reader's perspective. How can you doubt it in a way that makes it stronger by realigning it with your reader?
Yeah, that's crazy good advice, man. I'll actually wait to ask this towards the end, but maybe I'll do this then now. Doubting yourself, obviously, doubting your content that you wrote, I think is easier to do when there's not a lot of copy you've written. But I think where I get stuck personally, and maybe probably a lot of other people too, you have to write like a sales page or a webinar script or something that's like just so long that it's hard to kind of wrap your head around it. Like, how do you write something that's so in depth and then have, is it just time? Is it just you have to commit a lot of time to doing this? Or is there a process you have for writing something out that long? Because I just feel like having to doubt yourself along every single stage of the way, it's almost like this perfectionism kicks in and then you never get anything done,
Yeah. So this will change everything for you. There is a process. Number one, it's that research component we talked about, like doing your research to the point where you're like, oh, I can do this. Like I know what I'm writing. I know what they need now. So having enough research where you're just rearranging your copy. That's the first thing, like doing your research to the point of like almost overkill where you're like, I have too much to work with.
Yeah.
That's the first thing. The second thing is that when gosh, what was I going to say? I totally just lost it.
That's okay. I do that all the time, man.
Okay. I got it. So like doing your research. The second thing is if you're having a lot of trouble, like just starting, write what's easiest. So if you're like, I don't know how to start this crazy thing, like, but I know how I'm going to end it, write the end. Because all you're doing is you're writing chunks of your copy and then you just rearrange them and you write some transition stuff. So there's a very specific process that Gene Schwartz, who wrote the book Breakthrough Advertising and The Brilliance Breakthrough, both incredible books, and they're like the Bibles for copywriters. And he was one of the largely considered like the greatest copywriter ever. His process was that he would sit down and his whole thing was, I have this blank piece of paper in front of me, and I set a timer for 33 minutes and 33 seconds. And in those 33 minutes, I can't do anything unless it relates to the page in front of me. So what I'll do is I'll sit there and I'll look at the page, and I'll kind of look around, I'll play with my pencil, drink some of my coffee, and pretty soon I'll get bored. And so I'll just start writing because that's the only thing in front of me. And so I just start writing and I get into it. And when the timer goes off, I take a break for 5 minutes, go make myself another cup of coffee, go just do something else, play with the dog, whatever. And he talked about how that, and I think this is now called, or it's similar to the Pomodoro technique.
Yeah.
Of breaking your work into little chunks like that. That blank space of not doing anything allows the ideas to marinate in your brain and just kind of bubble to the top. And then he would just do this until it's done. And depending on how long the thing is that you're writing, how long it's going to take, if you can write it in one day, you should, because your mood seeps into your writing. But you have to free yourself from the idea that you're trying to write a webinar or a sales page. That was the other thing that Schwartz said. He said, I'm not trying to write a good ad. I'm just trying to write the next sentence. And he would just write whatever came to his head, and he would get the first draft out there, and then he'd walk away from it for a day. And a lot of copywriters do this. They'll write this big thing, get it all out while they're in the same emotional state, and then they'll come back and they'll revise the whole thing. So those three things of doing the research, writing what's easy first, and then, having a specific process for writing it all at once, and then coming back later after your mind has just torn it to pieces and you come back and you change it. That's a really good way to start. And it's what a lot of professionals do.
Yeah, kind of like just a brain dump. I mean, I have to do that a lot when I'm producing infographics, for example. Like I just throw out everything I know about the topic, and then I look at it later. What's the best way to visually represent this and organize it?
Yeah, totally.
So I liked what you said there, though, and you mentioned the pencil. So do you go totally analog when you're starting?
Sometimes when I'm bouncing around like copy ideas, often I'll use paper when I'm just thinking of like an angle. But for the actual writing of the copy, like I will do, on the computer. There is a learning technique popularized by Gary Halbert where you hand write ads. And I've done that. That's actually a really good way to get the psychology of copy into your brain. Something that really I should do more probably. But you're just copying down these ads while you're paying attention. Like you can't just zone out and just be like copying. But that way you learn the structure of a great ad in a different way. It's really interesting how that works. But yeah, it activates a different part of your brain when you use, a pen.
Yeah, and I heard this advice from Derek Halpern actually, and he mentions that when he starts to write, any big project, he always goes totally analog, and I get it because like your computer's so distracting,
Yeah.
and like Facebook, I mean, obviously standalone by itself, Facebook is distracting. Even when I go to Facebook to do a specific thing, like, oh, I need to go manage this ad, or oh, I need to go to my group, I'll go there and I'll look at Facebook for half a second and forget why I'm there.
Yeah.
It's the weirdest thing. It's like, oh, damn it. Why am I here? So going.
Dude, you gotta get the newsfeed eradicator. It's a Chrome extension that it blocks your newsfeed. It totally cures any distraction.
That's good. Cause yeah, I don't go in there to scroll my newsfeed. I go in there to do something, but I see something. Yeah. And then it's gone.
Yeah. So. It just replaces it with like a motivational quote.
Yeah.
And the other thing I'll do to reduce distractions when I'm writing, of course, close all other tabs, but then make the Google Docs screen like full screen so that there's no room for little icons to pop up and distract me.
That's a good one too. Cool, man. Cool. So tell us now, what would you say to someone who's a little bit more advanced, someone who wants, to take their copywriting to the next level, something they maybe haven't considered yet?
So this is something that I actually just learned recently I got inside Copy Chief, which is a great community for copywriters and business owners who want to meet copywriters. And there's a training in there from Joe Schreifer, who works at Agora Financial, and their bread and butter is direct response marketing. So this tactic, I did not come up with it. It came from the incubator of Agora Financial, where they're just writing copy all the time. It's called copyboarding. Not like waterboarding where you're torturing your copy, but like storyboarding, where Hollywood producers will like storyboard like the whole sequence of a movie. And you do this with copy by first, you have to have like your big angle. And that this process doesn't really help with that. You have to have the angle that's really going to hook your readers. That's a separate thing. What this is it's a great way to visualize how you can structure your copy. And what you do, get a couple people who know the product, maybe it's your client, and a couple people who just know really well. And then you take your angle, your big idea that you want to test, and then you just brainstorm every single objection you can possibly think of. So like the example that was in the training was the product was like some kind of solar generator, and the market was like survivalists. And so it's like, okay, what are the possible objections we could come up against this idea? And they just went for 15, 20 minutes. And in the training, Joe talks about how they'll go for like 2 or 3 hours just brainstorming every single objection you can do. And then they write them all on sticky notes, put them up on the wall, and then they'll rearrange the sticky notes by order of magnitude. Like, okay, so what is the biggest objection that someone would need answered before they read past the headline? And then you just structure your copy, answering the objections in your copy until everything is answered. And one thing that I've discovered is that you can actually use this process not just for like a sales page or a single piece of content, but you can use it across your funnel. Not just the one thing, but across every touch point of the customer's journey. Or even smaller things like landing pages or emails. You can use this process which is really what copywriting is supposed to be, but it's like this mindset shift where you're proactively looking for the objections and anticipating them so much more actively, and then structuring in a way that you can actually just answer each objection so that the person's reading it and they're like, wow.
Yeah. And I love that. It's also like, it's almost back to what we just talked about. It's like going analog again, because it's just, I don't know why, but I've never been able to find software that allows me to mind map or reorganize my thoughts as easily as, like you just said, just getting sticky notes and putting it up on a whiteboard. Like Trello is okay, mind map software is okay, but like
there's real-time board. That's one that's moderately useful. But again, like when you have that, hand to pen to paper connection, and you're getting that idea and you can physically see it, and then you put it up on front of you on your whiteboard, there's just something about it that just helps you process it.
Yeah, I mean, it's again falls into the same lines of infographics. It's just easier for you to consume it because and understand it because it's so much more visual.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool, man. Well, this has been incredibly helpful advice. I, can't thank you enough for spending some time today with us on the show. Before I let you go, let's maybe share a couple of resources that you think people could benefit from. One of my personal favorites is, I'm going to probably pronounce his name wrong, but Ogilvy on advertising. Ogilvy owned a huge ad agency in the 70s in New York. I think it's actually still one of the biggest agencies in the world. But it was written back in the 70s. And he talks about how to do radio ads and TV commercials. But it's so good because the concepts in there, they're still just as relevant as they were back then. So that's one of my personal favorites, but I'm sure you've got good ones too.
So I would say if you're more of a beginner, a really good resource it's actually a newer book by Brian Kurtz and Craig Simpson. It's called The Advertising Solution. Okay. But what it is it's basically a summary of 6 of the classic copywriting books. Yeah. It just goes through and just summarizes the highlights, and it's super digestible, super just easy to read. And it's a really great survey of all of the good stuff and an introduction to then go and read all those other classic books. So that's the biggest, that's a really actionable one. Another one that I found, I already mentioned it, How to Write a Good Advertisement by Vic Schwab. That's one of my personal favorites just because it just breaks it down in such an easy way. And then, of course, if you're an advanced copywriter, you've probably already read Breakthrough Advertising. So that's kind of, like I said, that's kind of the Bible of copywriting. However, it's very dense and can be tough to get through. So one book that you should read as a writer that is gaining popularity because Brian Kurtz, who published it, has been really promoting it a lot, is The Brilliance Breakthrough, which is less about copywriting and more just about writing. And that one has been transformational for me in thinking about how I write. And it's absolutely going to change how I teach my kids when I have kids someday, about English language.
Gather around. We're going to talk about copywriting.
Just ridiculous. The stuff we learned in grammar school is just garbage. Yeah. This stuff is just, he's there are 2 words in the English language. There are picture words and connecting words. And it's why didn't we learn that? Just it's so simple.
I'm thinking it might be a little bit of a scary world if everyone was really, really good at selling.
Right.
But yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. It's really solid advice. So I got one more question as I'm just thinking through this. What would you say to someone who's on the fence and they're just you know what? Copywriting's not that important. I can write. I'm not stupid. What would you say to that person why you think copywriting is such a crucial skill in business?
Well, I would say that copywriting is marketing. Copywriting is the core of marketing. If you want to get an education in marketing, I suggest you start with copywriting. And it's it's hard to make a case for marketing because it's so intuitive. It's this is how you make money. This is how you sell. It's been said that marketing isn't the most important thing. It's the only thing. And that's so true, especially in the early days of your business. A lot of entrepreneurs who just get really successful really fast are just naturally good salesmen, naturally good at marketing. Yeah. Copywriting is salesmanship in print. That's all it is, or on the screen. So it's worth studying even just the basics of copywriting and getting to know even just the basics, because it's not just useful for selling in business. It's useful for every single situation in which you have to convince someone of your viewpoint, where you're making it seem like you're showing them a benefit. So for you as a business owner, the benefit is literally more money in your bank account, because when you align your copy with your market and you're able to use the right words, it makes a tangible difference in your bottom line. And for everyone else, it makes a tangible difference when you're having an argument with your spouse. It makes a tangible difference in every area. So
yeah, I love what you said too. That was an incredibly good quote about how copywriting is essentially just salesmanship in words. And I think that's key, because as I always say this, and I probably said it on the show before, but I envy people who came from a sales background and get into marketing, because I didn't have that. I thought I could hide behind my computer, and like for years, I'm like, why am I not growing my business? Like, well, you're not selling anymore. So like, learning that as a skill. And I think you would agree with me that copywriting, some people are naturally better at it, but it is a skill you can hone and get better at.
Oh, absolutely. Like, I never considered myself a copywriter. And even now, it's just like, there's no point, and this kind of plays into imposter syndrome, which everyone struggles with. There's no point where you're like, yeah, I've got this. Like, I'm an amazing copywriter. Yeah. I heard it said that at some point, like you'll never reach that point, but you reach a point in your journey, and it's usually after you've learned enough to know how much you don't know, that it's like, it's really at that point just a decision to call yourself an expert, and you might as well make it today, not tomorrow.
Really, really incredible advice, man. So I know you work with Scott, so of course we can find some of your work there, but where would you like me to send people if they want to learn more from you or just learn a little bit more about you?
Theoretically, there's a website, CameronSnow.com, that is like not really, there's something on there, I think. Honestly, my biggest way of connecting with people is on Facebook. I think it's just facebook.com/Kameron.Snow or something like that.
Cool. I'll make sure to link up everything in the show notes below. But man, this is some seriously valuable advice. I can't wait to see you and meet you personally. Actually, we already met, but see you again in San Diego. So I know we're going to party hard with the Rise 25 guys at the open bar and talk business. So I'm looking forward to that, man. But again, thank you so much for taking some time to come onto the show. Everyone watching, if you enjoyed this, go ahead and subscribe to my channel or like my page, depending on where you're watching this. And this has been Laptop Empires, the show that teaches you how to build and grow a business from anywhere in the world. We'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.